Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring incentive salience. Have you ever felt like this irresistible pull towards something, even if it wasn't something you needed? Like
Right.
that urge to check your phone every few minutes, even though you know nothing new is going to be there?
Oh, yeah.
That's incentive salience at work.
Uh-huh.
It's all about how our brains make certain things in our environment seem super desirable,
hmm
sometimes even more than things essential for our survival. We've got some really interesting research articles to help us unpack this concept today.
Yeah, what's fascinating about incentive salience is that it goes beyond just basic needs and drives.
Okay.
Like, think about it this way. It's not just about being thirsty and wanting water.
Yeah.
It's about how cues in our environment can trigger an intense wanting for something, sometimes even more than the actual reward itself.
Right. It's like how the mere sight of the Golden Arches can make you crave a burger and fries, even if you just eat lunch.
Yeah.
You're not actually hungry.
hmm
But the logo itself has triggered that desire.
Exactly. And researchers have been using brain imaging techniques like fMRI to understand what's happening in our brains when we experience incentive salience.
Okay.
One study found that the ventral striatum, a key part of the brain's reward system, lights up like a Christmas tree when people encounter cues associated with rewards.
So it's like our brains are hardwired to get excited about these cues, even if they might not be the best for us in the long run.
Yeah,
But tell me, is everyone's brain wired the same way when it comes to incentive salience?
that's a great question. And the answer is no. Researchers studying Pavlovian conditioning, where a neutral stimulus is paired with a reward, have discovered some fascinating individual differences.
Uh-huh.
They've identified two distinct groups, sign trackers and goal trackers.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the difference between these two groups?
Think of a classic experiment with a rat. You pair a light with a food reward. Every time the light flashes, the rat gets a tasty treat. Now, goal trackers, they quickly learn that the light predicts food, but they focus on the goal, getting that food. They'll go straight for the food dispenser when the light comes on.
Makes sense. So they see the light as a helpful signal, but they don't obsess over it.
Precisely. But sign trackers, they become fixated on the light itself. They might even start sniffing and nibbling at the light, almost as if the light itself has become rewarding.
Wow. That's interesting. So it's like they transfer that feeling of wanting onto the cue itself rather than the actual reward.
Exactly. And this difference in how strongly they attribute incentive salience to cues rather than the reward itself could be a key factor in understanding why some individuals are more vulnerable to things like addiction.
Now that you mentioned addiction, I can see how this plays out. If you're a sign tracker, those drug-related cues, the people, the places, the paraphernalia, could become incredibly powerful and difficult to resist.
Absolutely. For someone prone to sign tracking, those cues can take on a life of their own, almost becoming as addictive as the drug itself.
And it makes me think, what role does dopamine play in all of this? We know it's often called the feel-good neurotransmitter, but it sounds like it's much more nuanced than that.
You're right, dopamine is far more complex than just pleasure. It's actually more about wanting, about that anticipatory excitement and motivation to seek out rewards.
Okay.
Studies have shown that sign trackers release more dopamine in response to cues, suggesting a stronger wanting drive compared to goal trackers.
So it's that surge of dopamine, that feeling of, I gotta have it, that can make it so difficult for people struggling with addiction to resist those triggers.
Yeah.
But what about those of us who don't struggle with addiction?
Yeah.
Does incentive salience affect us too?
Absolutely. Think about all the ways companies use incentive salience to influence our behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Advertising, marketing, product design, even social media notifications. They're all designed to capture our attention and make us want things, whether it's a new phone, a trendy outfit, or just checking for those likes on our latest post.
That's so true.
Yeah.
But how much control do we actually have over this wanting system?
Well, one thing that makes this even more complicated is the role of uncertainty.
Okay.
Research has shown that uncertainty actually boosts incentive salience.
Really?
Yeah, it's a bit counterintuitive, but think about it. Not knowing when or if you'll receive a reward can actually make you want it even more.
So like gambling.
Yeah.
The thrill of the unknown, the possibility of winning big, that keeps people hooked.
Precisely. That element of unpredictability ramps up the dopamine and makes those cues even more alluring, even if the odds are stacked against you. But what's even more fascinating is that incentive salience isn't just about material things. It also applies to social cues.
Wait, are you saying that people can become as wanted as a slot machine?
It might sound strange, but yes. Studies have shown that sign trackers are more likely to develop a preference for places associated with social interaction.
So like a coffee shop where they've had great conversations with friends.
Exactly. They are drawn to places where they've experienced those positive social connections. And not only that, they tend to engage in more social interactions overall and even show a preference for meeting new people.
So for some people, social interaction itself holds that captivating, wanting power. It's like that feeling of excitement you get when you meet someone new and really hit it off.
Yes. It seems like for those who are highly sensitive to social cues, the anticipation of connecting with others can trigger that same wanting system.
It's all so fascinating. It seems like we're just scratching the surface of understanding how incentive salience shapes our behavior.
We are. And what's even more exciting is that research is constantly evolving, and we're learning more and more about how to harness the power of incentive salience for positive change.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of positive change are we talking about?
Well, before we dive into that, I think it's important to remember that incentive salience isn't inherently good or bad.
Okay.
It's a powerful mechanism that has helped us survive and thrive as a species.
I can see that. Think about our ancestors being highly attuned to cues that signal food or danger would have been crucial for survival.
Precisely. In an environment where resources were scarce and threats were unpredictable, those who were most sensitive to cues would have had a significant advantage.
Right.
Imagine you're wandering through a forest and you spot a patch of bright red berries.
Okay.
For someone highly attuned to incentive salience, those berries would act like a beacon, drawing them in.
Right, because those bright colors might signal a source of energy and nutrients. But couldn't that also lead them to poisonous berries?
Exactly. That's the double-edged sword of incentive salience. While it can lead us towards rewards, it can also make us vulnerable to things that might harm us.
Right.
And it's important to remember that the environment we live in today is vastly different from that of our ancestors.
It's almost like our brains haven't quite caught up to the modern world. We're surrounded by cues designed to trigger our wanting system, from flashy ads to those irresistible notifications on our phones.
It's like we're living in a giant experiment on incentive salience.
Yeah.
But the good news is that by understanding how it works, we can start to regain some control.
So how can we use this knowledge to our advantage? You mentioned harnessing incentive salience for positive change.
Yes, one promising area of research is in developing interventions for addiction.
Okay.
For example, researchers are exploring cue exposure therapy, where individuals are gradually exposed to drug-related cues in a safe and controlled environment.
So the idea is to help them break the association between those cues and the intense craving they trigger.
Exactly. By repeatedly exposing them to the cues without the presence of the drug, the cues gradually lose their power. It's like retraining the brain to see those cues for what they really are, just objects or situations rather than triggers for overwhelming desire.
And this could be applied to other areas as well, right? Like helping people manage cravings for unhealthy foods or even breaking those habits of constantly checking social media.
Absolutely. And another exciting area of research is exploring how to use incentive salience to promote healthy behaviors.
Yeah.
Imagine if we could make exercise as appealing as a video game or eating vegetables as enticing as a slice of cake.
Wait, is that even possible? It sounds like something out of a science fiction movie.
It might sound futuristic, but researchers are already experimenting with different strategies. One approach is to pair healthy behaviors with rewards that trigger our wanting system.
So instead of rewarding yourself with a pizza after a workout, you can reward yourself with something that's both pleasurable and healthy, like a delicious smoothie or a new workout outfit.
Exactly. By making those healthy choices more appealing, we can increase the likelihood that people will stick with them over time. It's about hacking our own brains, so to speak, to work for us rather than against us.
Okay, so we've talked about addiction and healthy habits, but what about the social aspect of incentive salience?
Well, researchers are finding that incentive salience plays a huge role in how we form and maintain social connections.
Okay.
Think about it. Those initial cues that draw us to someone, their smile, their sense of humor, even the way they dress can trigger a surge of dopamine, making us want to get to know them better.
So it's like those cues create a sense of anticipation and excitement, similar to what we see with those sign-tracking rats fixated on the light.
Precisely. And these initial interactions, if they're positive, reinforce those positive associations, strengthening the bond.
Okay.
But for individuals who are particularly sensitive to social cues, this process can be even more intense.
So could this explain why some people seem to effortlessly make friends while others struggle with social anxiety?
It's certainly a possibility. For those who are highly attuned to social cues, the anticipation of social interaction itself can be incredibly rewarding. But for those who are more sensitive to potential rejection or negative social feedback, those same cues might trigger anxiety and avoidance.
It makes you wonder if we could use this knowledge to develop interventions for social anxiety. Could we somehow rewire those associations so social cues trigger excitement and connection rather than fear and avoidance?
That's a question researchers are actively exploring. One idea is to use techniques similar to cue exposure therapy, gradually exposing individuals to social situations in a safe and supportive environment.
So like starting with small interactions and gradually working up to larger groups in more challenging social settings.
Exactly. And another avenue of research is exploring how to leverage technology to create more engaging and rewarding social experiences. Imagine virtual reality platforms that could help individuals practice social skills and build confidence in a safe and controlled setting.
That's fascinating. It seems like the potential applications of incentive salience in the social realm are vast.
They are. And as our understanding continues to grow, I believe we'll see even more innovative applications emerge in the years to come.
So where do we go from here?
Well, I think the key takeaway is this. Incentive salience is a powerful force that shapes our behavior in profound ways.
hmm
By understanding how it works, both in our external and internal worlds, we can start to harness its power for good.
That sounds empowering, but how do we actually do that?
It starts with awareness.
Hmm.
Think about your day-to-day life. What are those cues that seem to have an unusual pull on your attention? Is it the notification ding on your phone, the smell of freshly baked cookies, or maybe even the sight of a certain person?
I'm already starting to notice things I hadn't really paid attention to before. But becoming aware is just the first step, right?
Right.
What do we do with this newfound awareness?
That's where the real work begins. Once you're aware of those cues that trigger your wanting system, you can start to make conscious choices about how you respond. Instead of mindlessly reaching for your phone every time it buzzes, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, do I really need to check this right now, or am I just reacting to that external cue?
So it's about creating that space between the cue and the response.
Yeah.
That moment of reflection where we can choose how we want to act rather than just react.
Exactly. And this applies to our internal world as well. We've been talking about how external cues gain incentive salience, but what about our own internal states? Our thoughts, feelings, even our physical sensations can also acquire that same wanting power.
So you're saying that our own thoughts and feelings can become like those flashing lights and sounds of the slot machine, drawing us in even if they're not serving us well?
Think about it this way. Have you ever gotten caught in a loop of negative thinking? You know those thoughts aren't helpful, but you just can't seem to shake them. It's almost as if those thoughts, by virtue of their intensity, become wanted, even if they're causing you distress.
That makes a lot of sense. And it also feels a bit unsettling, to be honest. If our own internal experiences can hijack our wanting system, does that mean we're at the mercy of our own minds?
Not necessarily. Remember, awareness is key. By recognizing that our internal states can acquire incentive salience, just like external cues, we can start to choose which thoughts and feelings we give our attention to.
So instead of getting sucked into those negative thought spirals, we can develop strategies to shift our focus to more positive and helpful thoughts.
Precisely. And maybe we can even find ways to make those positive thoughts more wanted, so to speak, by associating them with rewarding experiences, practicing gratitude, or simply making a conscious effort to savor those moments of joy and contentment.
So it's about actively shaping our internal landscape, making it a place where those positive thoughts and feelings flourish.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we have more agency than we often realize. We're not just passive recipients of our experiences, both internal and external. We have the power to choose what we focus on, what we give energy to, and ultimately what we allow to shape our lives.
That's incredibly empowering. It makes you realize that incentive salience, while a powerful force, isn't something that controls us. It's a tool that we can learn to use to our advantage.
And that brings us to the heart of what we've been exploring today. Incentive salience is a fundamental aspect of the human experience. It shapes our desires, our motivations, and our interactions with the world around us. But it's not a force to be feared. By understanding how it works, we can start to make more conscious choices, cultivate healthier habits, and even shape our own internal landscapes in ways that support our well-being.
So as we go about our day, the key is to pay attention, both to the cues in our environment and to our own internal states.
Become a curious observer of your own experience. Notice what draws you in, what triggers that wanting response, and ask yourself, is this serving me? Is this something I want to cultivate, or is it time to shift my focus?
That's a great reminder. By becoming more aware of our own incentive salience, we can become more conscious architects of our own lives.
Exactly. And with that, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of incentive salience.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. It's been a fascinating exploration of a concept that's often overlooked, but incredibly powerful.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.